Welcome to the Social Mobility Talks podcast brought to you by the Social Mobility Commission. Social Mobility Commission exists to see a country where the circumstances of your birth do not determine the outcome in your life. We do that by working with a range of employers, schools, universities, and professions to challenge them and also support them in doing their bit for promoting social mobility in the country. My name is Parminder Kohli. I'll be the host of the podcast, and I'm one of the commissioners at the Social Mobility Commission. And I'm really pleased to welcome two distinguished guests with me, Hollie Crompton and Neil Morrison. Could you please introduce yourselves?
Yeah.
Go for it, Hollie.
Thanks. I'm Hollie Crompton and I'm the Social Mobility Lead at PwC. I'm based in our Manchester office and I joined PwC back in 2004 on a school leaver programme, which is part of the reason I'm really passionate about social mobility and different routes into different organisations. I initially joined in audit and became a chartered accountant, so I did public sector audit for a number of years, and since then I've done a range of different roles in student recruitment, learning and development, and now in the social mobility team. So it's been a fantastic career of many different types of roles at PwC, which has been great. And I think working with so many different students over the years is also what's really driven my passion for social mobility as well. And I do a national role from Manchester, which is fantastic. Don't have to be based in London to do a national role. My role now involves leading our social mobility strategy and work. So our social mobility strategy covers recruitment, working really closely with the recruitment teams to make sure that we're recruiting more people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds into the firm. Development and progression, so working with the inclusion team to make sure that once those people are in, they're able to develop and progress at the same rate as their peers from more advantaged backgrounds. Community engagement, so my team run a really big community outreach programme with a focus on social mobility, and that's primarily with secondary schools. We target schools with a higher than average proportion of students on receipt of free school meals and in social mobility cold spots, but we also have some smaller programmes as well with other underrepresented groups. And then finally advocacy, so the work that we do with the Commission, the work that we do with lots of different social mobility related charities as well. So that's what I do, and I love it.
So Neil Morrison, I'm the HR Director for Severn Trent. Severn Trent is a utility business based in the Midlands. I've been there for 7 years and I joined from Penguin Random House, the publishers. And I guess that was where my sort of understanding and passion for social inclusion, social mobility started back in 2010 with the Access to the Professions kind of work and looking at that in terms of publishing, which is a massively sort of privileged kind of industry. And then I moved to utilities based in the Midlands, and part of the reason was to do this, and went, wow, there's just so much richness to the kind of opportunity and the diversity that exists in our regions compared to very central London population and workforce. So over the last 7 years, we've been really looking at how we leverage that position as a kind of big employer, FTSE listed employer in the West Midlands, culminating in some work that we launched last year to take 100,000 people out of poverty in the next 10 years through training, employment and skills, working with other employers across the region. So a lot of my work is kind of, if you like, the day-to-day HR stuff that I do, but the stuff that gets me really excited and kind of passionate is the outreach. It's the work that we do with communities. It's the work that we do across the region to really try and drive opportunity.
Fantastic to see your rich backgrounds, and I'm sure over the next half an hour, 45 minutes, we'll explore many of the topics you're so passionate about. So let's start with how did your organization come to look at social mobility as an important driver for change in your organization? What was the vision behind it, and who championed that to begin with? So maybe we'll start with you, Neil.
Yeah, so arriving at Severn Trent, one of the things that I noticed was the amount of kind of richness that we had in terms of the entry routes, ranging from apprenticeships through to unskilled entry, and the way in which people progress through the organisation. And kind of understanding social mobility from my previous career and then applying it in the organisation I was in, where it hadn't been done, if I was totally honest, because people were just going, well, that's kind of normal. It's what we do. It's how we are. And so taking that lens and saying, actually, we've got a brilliant opportunity to supercharge this and to drive it forward meant that we got a really, really passionate sort of leadership team. And I would say it's driven by across the executive committee that everybody's super passionate about the work that we do in this space, because a lot of them have come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds themselves, have come up through the tools within the organisation. We're one of those industries where you can go from the shop floor to the C-suite, if you like. And so they're coming up feeling really passionate about creating sort of the pathways for other people to do that. And so it's totally embedded in the work that we do now across the board as an organisation, whether it's work experience, whether it's kind of apprenticeships or route into entry, whether it's about the measurement, whether it's about performance, and is shared, as I say, across the executive team. But I think I'd like to say it's a bit of luck and a bit of kind of skill in terms of getting everyone super passionate about it, because it was in the DNA when I arrived there sort of 7 years ago.
So you planted the kernel, but it caught on very strongly with the rest of the leadership team, and everybody embraced that change.
Absolutely. I think it just resonates. It resonates with a lot of people because, 90% of our workforce are customers and 90% of our workforce are shareholders. So that overlap between employees, customers and shareholders, living in our communities is really, really high compared to most organisations. So this work really resonates with people, because when we're talking about, opportunity, and when we're talking about social mobility, we're talking about their families, their friends, their communities. We're not talking about this other group that's sat somewhere else that we need to go and kind of help. It's the people that are around us every day.
Oh, thank you. So it seems like it's a 7-year journey. How about at PwC, Hollie? I know it's been ranked #1 employer in the Social Mobility Index. So keen to hear what the journey has been for PwC.
Yeah, absolutely. So ever since I've been at PwC, since 2004, we've been doing social mobility related activity through things like our outreach, through things like our student recruitment. But it wasn't until around about 2016-17 that we really brought that all together under one central strategy, one central team. So basically just pulling everything that we were doing together in the different areas of the organisation and saying, right, this is what we actually want to do on social mobility. This is all related to social mobility, and we're going to manage it centrally. And I think that was really important to make sure that we're all working towards the same goals, and to make sure that we're aware of everything that's going on across the organisation that's benefiting social mobility, and to try and help with social mobility. That very much came from leadership. So our board have got this as one of their key priorities. Our senior partner, Kevin Ellis, is massively passionate about social mobility and has, helped us to achieve absolutely loads in this area. What I would say is we're still very much on a journey, and we know that. We've been in the top 10 of the Social Mobility Employer Index since the start. We were #1 last year, which is great, but there's still more we need to do, and there's still more improvements we need to make. So for anybody looking at this thinking, well, you've done all you need to do on this, we absolutely haven't. It's an ongoing journey for all employers, I would say.
Yeah, I can imagine it's always a journey, and you can always get better every day. The question on my mind is, why was it was so important for Kevin and his leadership team to drive that? What was the underlying driver? Was it just altruism to do something, or was there a business imperative for it?
Yeah, I think at the time when we created the team and the strategy, social mobility was becoming higher up on the external agenda, on the government's agenda, on in the press, in society, basically. So that's why we decided to create the team and the strategy. But I think from a PwC perspective, in terms of the business case, yes, there's the business case, the moral business case around doing the right thing and making sure that you're giving back. But the main things for us are around talent. Mm-hmm. So there's so much untapped, fantastic potential talent out there that you're not reaching unless you're doing something around social mobility, and competitive advantage. Like, potential employees are looking to us to see what we're doing around not only social mobility, but broader sort of CSR and diversity inclusion, as our clients, interested to see what we're doing around this topic. So I think it's not just about doing what's right, it's about talent and competitive advantage as well.
Yeah, I think that's come out from both your opening comments, that it's not just about doing the right thing, which by itself is a laudable objective, but it is something which your shareholders, your customers, your employees are expecting, and it can be turned into competitive advantage by looking at talent in the broadest sense. So that's fantastic. Moving on, talking to a lot of people who are trying to looking at other organizations, we're looking at promoting socioeconomic status as one of the characteristics to promote within the organization. Data comes up as a big challenge. So let's just talk about your journey in terms of how has it been over the last 7 years, in where you started, where you're at, what are some of the challenges you faced in collecting data?
Yeah, so data has been a massive challenge for us as well, and I think it's probably, when I speak to other employers, one of the things that comes up most around their challenges and what they're what they're wanting to work on. We started off with 20% of our staff who had told us what their socioeconomic background was based on their parents' occupation, which is the measure we use, which is recommended by the Commission as the best measure. And we managed to up that over a number of years to 80, above 80, I think when I went about 85%. But that was really hard work, and we didn't wait for that data to start taking action around social mobility is the first thing I'd say. So for any employers out there who are thinking, I haven't got the data yet, or we haven't got either any data or a really good amount of data yet, don't make you think that you need to wait to take action, because we know there's an issue. We've got all the external research, we've got all the research the Commission have done. There's a lot published around this that says that there is an issue, so we do need to start taking action. But I think what the data allows you to do is to really see where you've got problems and target those areas. So which business areas are more problematic than others, which offices might be more problematic than others, which roles within your organisation might be more problematic than others, and then allows you to really do that really targeted intervention. So the way we did it was we did a massive campaign around data disclosure. We started off in 2019 with an email from our chief people officer at the time, who sits on our board, and we very rarely get approval for firm-wide emails, so that was really good, and that went out with a survey around socioeconomic background. And what we've done with that survey since is incorporated it into all of our internal comms around social mobility, and we've also incorporated it into our compliance training as well. So when all our staff do their annual compliance training in April, they have to go on to the system and have a look and answer the socioeconomic background questions. Even if they prefer not to share, that's obviously there is an option, because it's not.
So there are multiple prompts they get.
Yeah, so they get multiple prompts. So the compliance training was really helpful. And what we worked on was really trying to help staff to feel comfortable, so to trust what we were using the data for, what we wanted it for, reassure them that it's confidential, it's, there's only certain people that have got access to it within the HR team. It's not going to be used to make promotion decisions or recruitment decisions, and really what we're trying to do is to make PwC a fairer place to work, a fairer place to access and a fairer place to work, and that's why we want the data. So we tried to reassure them around that. We also tried to just raise awareness of the topic more broadly to try and encourage them to provide their data as well. So sharing stories, getting senior people within the organisation to share their stories as well, and to help people to feel comfortable disclosing their data and also talking about the issue as well. So we managed to get up to above 80% now, which is great, and that's enabled us to do loads of fantastic things, from publishing our pay gap to calculating our targets for socioeconomic background and publishing the data on our websites as well.
Well, that's great, and a lot of firsts, I think, there for PwC. What about Severn, Neil? What's been your experience on data, and how have you been using it since you collected?
Yeah, so we're not quite at the heady heights of 80%. So we've got about 42% of employees share their data, and of that, 36% based on parental occupation come from low socioeconomic background. Yeah. I think one of the things that we see is that very long-serving employees, probably they're not reticent, but they don't understand the importance of giving their data necessarily. If you've been working for us for 25 years and you've been working in a particular operational area, there's kind of a, well, what does it matter whether I give you that or don't give you that? So that population's slightly harder to get to, whereas when people are joining us and coming into us and we're collecting it at the point of joining, along with a whole host of other data, they're probably a bit more comfortable in declaring, along with, as I say, a whole range of other things. But, I guess 42% is probably greater than the turnout at the local elections, a couple of, so it gives you enough. And I think Hollie's point is absolutely spot on. It gives you enough to start to say, let's do some things with this. So let's understand from that data, are people progressing at the same rate if they're from a lower socioeconomic background than a colleague who comes from a different background? Are they getting, what's their performance ratings in relation to, do we see any patterns there? What do we see in terms of kind of pay data? What do we see in terms of kind of range across grades? So it allows you to start to get under the surface and start to do more as you're getting the data. And I think it's a really important message to say, you can still crack on and start to use it. You don't have to wait till you're the kind of heady heights of PwC with 80% plus data. And the more organisations that are working on it, the more you can then start to show a compelling reason to employees why you're collecting it, because you're actually...
It doesn't become a novelty anymore that everybody seems to be doing it and it's the norm.
Exactly. And, if I give an example, when I started in HR, which was a few years ago, let's just put it that way, when you started to collect sexuality data, that was seen as really unusual. Yeah. And now, I'd say most people joining an organisation wouldn't be surprised that they were asked to collect that data and asked to fill that in. I think that will happen with social mobility data over a period of time. But at the moment, asking people about their parents' occupation can feel a bit unusual if they don't understand why it's done. But give it time and that will become part of the norm.
So maybe a question around, is from now gathering data, is there anything which has come out as a surprise or counterintuitive if you didn't have that data? Any insights from your use of gathering the data, Neil?
Yeah, so we did a piece of analysis, I think, about 2-3 years ago. So it's a little bit dated now. But what we were able to see is those people who declared as coming from a lower socioeconomic background, actually their performance in general was significantly higher than those people that came from a non-comparative background. And they were likely to get an additional promotion during their period of tenure. Now, as I say, it was a couple of years ago, and it was a relatively small data set. But I guess that was one of the interesting things that started to help us have the debate in an organisation. So it's not just about kind of attracting skills, but actually there is a bit of a trade-off in terms of performance that you get in terms of, or a bit of a payback, I should say, rather than trade-off, in terms of performance when you're giving opportunity to people and welcoming into the organisation.
It's fantastic to hear, even if it's a small data set, it's what Hollie was saying, it allows you to broaden the talent pool that you're selecting from. You still keep the same standards and that shows in performance, so that bolsters the economic argument or performance argument of the organisation. So let's move on. One of the things we're quite keen to emphasize at the Social Mobility Commission, which is to say that the talent is evenly distributed around the country, but opportunities are not. And maybe Hollie, starting with you, I know you've done a lot of work in outreach in places like Bradford. Just share us a little bit about how you've gone to get talent and what you've done around going to where the talent sits rather than getting them all to come to London in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing I'd say is we're quite lucky with our structure in that we've got lots of offices across the UK, and we've got offices in most of the major cities. So people don't have to travel that far to get to us in the UK. I think the outreach that we do, we've really worked hard to try and target that effectively. So a lot of our outreach is with secondary school students. We have got smaller programs with primary now, and we're doing a pilot program with SEND schools and students. But the majority of our work is with secondary school students, and we've worked really hard to make sure that we're reaching the schools that will benefit from that support most. So the way we do that is we target based on percentage percentages of free school meals in those schools compared to the averages within those areas. We also look at social mobility cold spots and areas of deprivation in the devolved nations. And we try, if we can get this information, to establish which are the schools that aren't getting lots of other employers engaging with them and approaching them, because I think that's really important. So what we've tried to do is to get schools to come into our offices and into our events from outside of the local area. So we do have an office in Bradford, but there's lots of other cold spots where we don't have an office right there, but it is, quite easy for us to get the schools to come into the offices. So just some examples, Oldham, where I'm from, is 7 miles up the road from Manchester, but many employers in Manchester will work with schools directly around city centre Manchester, and actually you can bring in students from the likes of Oldham. We've had students into the London office from schools in Kent. So we'll provide the travel for them, we'll pay for the travel for them to come into the office, we'll adapt timings on the day so that they can get there a little bit later or set off a little bit earlier if they need to. But it's really important that students outside of those major city centres also get access to employer engagement. We're also involved in some collaborative outreach initiatives as well. The main one being the RISE Collaborative Outreach Initiative, which is led by the ICAEW, championed by the ICAEW, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. And that really involves targeting rural and coastal communities. So a lot of the outreach work that we do with them is in rural and coastal communities. And just going back to Bradford, we opened an office in Bradford in 2019, and what we found when we opened the office in Bradford is there was a whole host of local talent in Bradford who weren't travelling to our Leeds office for jobs. They Bradford and Leeds, whilst they're quite close, it can seem like a massive distance. So I think it was really important that we took the office to the talent. Bradford is one of the youngest cities in Europe, I think, and certainly one of the most diverse. And what we found by opening our office in Bradford is that we've been able to attract a whole host of local talent. Some of them will now be, on progression pathways as well, to do like professional qualifications, to become chartered accountants, and the diversity in our Bradford office is fantastic. So in our Bradford office, 30% of our staff come from a lower socioeconomic background based on parental occupation, and our firm-wide figure is 17%. So our Bradford office is massively more diverse in terms of socioeconomic background. So it is really important, I would say, that where you can, you are able to take either, your employer engagement and your outreach to communities outside of major cities, and if you are able to broaden out your places of work and locations of work, it will massively make a difference.
Thank you, Hollie. And maybe, Neil, given you're largely a Midlands-based business, your outreach program, what does it look like? How are you trying to reach out into your communities?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. We're a regional employer, which means that outreach for us is outreach across the areas of our operation, so the areas where we've got customers across the Midlands predominantly. But similar to Hollie, we look at trying to target those schools with a higher proportion of free school meals, those schools that perhaps don't have the additional support or resources or organisation in order to get employers in, and therefore we can go in and try and organise that to come in ourselves, but not only ourselves, other organisations that we partner with to make sure that those pupils are getting a richness of experience. We did about 860 work experience placements last year for students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, so specifically targeted at bringing them into our organisation and making sure that their transport's paid, their lunches are paid, all these things that make a massive difference. And I think, Hollie's point about hyperlocal is really, 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 really important. We see that between Birmingham and Coventry. So if you come from East Birmingham saying we've got a job in Coventry, well, that feels a million miles away, and the transport networks aren't necessarily going to help people. So it's about pinpointing the opportunities that exist really locally, and I'm always struck by the the kind of Harvard study of happiness, the longitudinal study that started in 1938, I think it was, and it showed the importance of community and creating jobs in communities rather than breaking up communities to get people to go to jobs. And I think that's something we're really, really interested in, how we can leverage that in our region. How can you create good quality jobs in communities for people? Whether that's start work from home. So a lot of our, we aren't office-based. The vast majority of our workforce aren't office-based. But they can start work from home, so they can get in their van at home and drive to their first job. Yeah. So that means that you're taking work to people rather than necessarily saying to them, you've got to come into a depot which is, 40 miles away. And if you don't drive, then you've got to try and, get the bus, and that's 4 buses or whatever it is. So, talking to young people and saying, here is the job that you can do in your community. Here's the route. You can come in at a level 2 apprenticeship, and this is how you can build up to a level 6 apprenticeship. And, here's the route that you can take, and you can stay living where you're living. Those kind of things really help on outreach in terms of making it kind of reachable, for the young people. They feel that they can see themselves doing it.
Fantastic examples of outreach from both your organization. Maybe, and the final area I'd like to explore with you is once you bring all this talent in and with this fantastic outreach program, what is it that your organizations are doing to move them up and giving them skills for life so that they continue to progress? Is the story of, how many people do we now see who start at the shop floor and get to the boardroom, and, what are the pathways you looking to create so there's continued progression from people who are coming from more challenged and more difficult socioeconomic backgrounds? So maybe start with you, Hollie, first. What's kind of the development program looking like for some of these individuals?
Yeah, so I think, the first thing I'd say on that is if you're going to do all this outreach as well, you've got to make sure that you've got appropriate routes into the organisation for people. And I think, we've really developed a broad range of routes into PwC. So as well as the graduate programme, which is the traditional route into the professional services firms, we've also got school leaver roles, degree apprenticeship roles, looking at what your requirements are for those roles. So thinking about, do you really need an academic attainment, requirement for a 2-1 degree, for example, which we removed a couple of years ago. So just thinking about what you're asking of the people that you're working with and the young people that you're doing outreach with in terms of gaining their positions. And really making the recruitment process very sort of skills-based rather than past performance-based, and thinking about, where they might have done work experience, or, leave all of that out and think about what transferable skills they've got for the role. And then I think once they're in the firm, what we've tried to do is to use a mix of quantitative and qualitative data. So we've obviously got a really large amount of data on our people, which is great, and we can look at, what does the data tell us around progression, promotions, performance ratings, and all of that stuff. But what we've also done more recently is really tried to listen to our people and think about the culture and how they feel about working at PwC. So we did a study with Think's Insight and Strategy, which looked at prospective joiners and new joiners and how they felt about either applying to and coming to work at PwC or joining PwC. So they'd been in the firm for a number of months when they were asked to complete diary entries and reflect on how it felt to be at PwC. And I think that's really given us some really interesting insights into some of the challenges that joiners from lower socioeconomic backgrounds face. So these were all student joiners. But the sort of things that came up were around networking and the importance of networking to the roles, and the fact that that can sometimes be more daunting for people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and not as familiar to them. I think a lack of awareness with our new joiners around things like the support mechanisms that are in place, things like our social mobility network, which is our biggest people network by far. We've got over 2,800 members. And whilst we tell them about it on their induction is a very busy, challenging week. And, they don't always remember that and pick up on that. So making sure that we're making them aware of all the, support and networking opportunities that are available. Something else that came up through that research was around financial issues in the first month of joining. So new joiners will sometimes be moving house or putting deposits down on flats, and they will be buying clothes for work, and they will be maybe socialising with colleagues in the first month, and we didn't pay them till the end of the month. So the feedback that came back from those new joiners was that is a real challenge for some people, especially those that haven't got, parents that can support them financially during that period. So one of the actions that we've taken off the back of that report is to offer £1,000 salary advance for any new student joiners. So I think listening to your staff really allows you to be able to make those changes that you wouldn't otherwise either be aware of or be able to implement.
Thank you. Great examples of bringing people in, supporting them, and progressing them. What about at Severn? Neil?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of things I'd build on those. So I think visible role models, like a lot of areas, is really, really important. And people in the senior management team and the executive team, willing to talk about kind of their roots and their progress, and being able to see people who look like me or speak like me, particularly across the West Midlands. We've got lots of very wonderful, strong, local regional dialects, and so being able to hear that in the executive committee, and understanding that people went to the same school that I did, and they didn't all go to kind of the grammar school or whatever it is. I think that's really, really important, and celebrating that. And I think the other part is about people taking out those kind of, I hate the phrase microaggression, but it is the microaggressions that often come later in your career as you progress through to, perhaps different to PwC. When you join our organisation, you're probably not doing much networking in the kind of professional services sense. You might be going to the pub with your mates after work, but as you progress up, you'll go into more of those situations which might feel a bit uncomfortable and unusual, and trying to make those less intimidating, so that people feel that that's a place that they feel welcome and they can go and participate, whether that's presenting to the exec committee or whether it's social events or networking events or whatever it is. I think those are really, really important, and recognising that many of us who've been around kind of senior positions for decades have learnt all of that, and not just taking that for granted, and kind of recognising that we've learnt it, and therefore being able to share some of that. I think those are really important. And then all the stuff that Hollie's talked brilliantly about, in terms of measurement of progress, in terms of helping people when they arrive in the organisation and finding their feet.
No, fantastic examples from both. Maybe in closing, let's just ask, given all your interest, passion on social mobility, if the organization's getting started on this journey, what would be, in your view, the most important thing organization needs to focus on as they get started? What would you say, Hollie?
I think obviously we've said that you don't need data to start taking action, and you absolutely don't, but data is key for you to be able to see where your issues are and for you to be able to take targeted interventions. And I would say, don't just stop at quantitative data, also think about that qualitative data, and listen to your employees and how they feel about working at your organisation. And I think that's really key for all employers to be doing.
Fantastic. What about you?
Yeah, so I'd say, getting that mindset that this is about competitive advantage for your organisation. This isn't about corporate social responsibility. This is about genuinely finding the talent that exists in your communities, getting them into your organisation, empowering and skilling them to deliver for you. And if you can get that mindset into your business, then I think that really helps take a step forward. There is not a skill shortage or a talent shortage in the UK. There's definitely not a talent shortage. It's about finding them and getting them into your business.
Fantastic. I could not have summed up the whole conversation better than that, Neil. So that just leaves me to give a huge word of thanks to both of you for coming today and talking to us at the Social Mobility Commission. And to our viewers, you can find many of these very interesting podcasts on all platforms, including Spotify, Apple, and on YouTube. So we hope you listen to some of the other talks and join us on this journey to promote social mobility in our society. So thank you.
Thank you.